Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, testing, testing. My name is Sadab. I am 22 years old. My name is Sadab.
Each library assistant was given a specific section of the library to distribute books.
The money was distributed among schools in this rural area. The waiter answered the customer's question patiently and provided helpful information.
Each student at the university has a guide that helps them select their classes.
The doctor will check your blood pressure to see if it is normal.
The assessment of this course will begin next week.
Graduates from this course generally find jobs in the insurance industry.
I have lectures on Tuesday from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m.
Studies have indicated that there is a relationship between diet and cancer.
She cut across the parking lot and strolled through the main entrance.
As an individual caught selling a large quantity of drugs in my late teens, I knew firsthand the power of opportunity as opposed to the wrath of the criminal justice system. Along the way, with the help of and guidance of my district attorney, my supervisor, and judges, I learned the power of the prosecutor to change lives instead of ruining them. And that's how we do it in Boston. We helped a woman who was arrested for stealing groceries to feed her kids get a job. Instead of putting an abused teenager in adult jail for punching another teenager, we secured mental health treatment and community supervision. A runaway girl who was arrested for prostituting to survive on the streets needed a safe place to live and grow, something we could help her with. I even helped a young man who was so afraid of the older gang kids showing up after school that one morning, instead of a lunchbox into his backpack, he put a loaded 9mm. We would spend our time that we would normally take prepping our cases for months and months for trial down the road by coming up with real solutions to the problems as they presented. Which is the better way to spend our time? How would you prefer your prosecutors to spend theirs? Why are we spending $80 billion on a prison industry that we know is failing when we could take that money and reallocate it into education, into mental health treatment, into substance abuse treatment, into community investment so we can develop our neighborhoods?
Under what weather conditions do rain and hail come?
What is the closest synonym of the word destiny?
Which word belongs to insects, mantis or lettuce?
Is hippopotamus a carnivore or a herbivore?
What is the formal name of breathing?
Steam is water that's heated to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Believe it or not, steam is invisible. You can see right through it. If you look closely at the end of your kettle's spout, you'll notice that the white stuff doesn't start right away. It begins billowing about a half-inch away from the nozzle with clear gas in between. The clear gas is the actual steam. The billowy white stuff is what the steam turns into when it hits the drier, cooler air of your kitchen. Those white billows are in fact clouds, not steam. In many ways, they are identical to the clouds you can see in the sky. The white color comes from tiny liquid water droplets that have condensed from the steam. More accurately, these billows are a type of cloud called a mixing cloud. These can form when two separate air masses with different temperatures and different amounts of water in them mix together. In the case of your kettle, the hot steamy gas cools rapidly in the kitchen air, and this sudden coolness is what makes some of the vapor condense. Mixing clouds are pretty common, and they don't need to start with steam. You see mixing clouds when you see your breath on a cold winter day. You'll find them rising from a bowl of warm soup. Wherever there's a mixing cloud, you can bet some warm, moist air is mixing with air that's cooler and drier.
These days, nearly everyone with a mobile phone is able to take photographs, or even make a video. But originally, cameras were so large and heavy that photography's appeal as a pastime was limited to a few enthusiasts. Also, the time needed for the exposure meant that your subjects, if you were photographing people, had to remain still for what must have seemed like a very long time. Movement would come out as a blur in the picture, or, if someone walked across the view of the lens, would not register at all, which is why early photographs of city streets appear deserted. In other words, all pictures had to be posed. However, as early as the 1880s, manufacturers in both Europe and America began producing miniature models, some of them small enough to be hidden in people's clothing. Cameras came in all shapes and sizes. Handbags, walking stick handles, and tie pins were among the oddest, and were collectively known as detective cameras. This was not because they were used in police work, but because the user could move about without attracting attention.
Scientists distinguish two basic ways in which we receive information from the outside world through the sense of touch: active and passive, or, to put it more simply, touching and being touched. Being touched, or passive tactile awareness, includes sensing external pressure and temperature acting on parts of the body, and this gives us clues as to the nature of our environment. Active touching is when we explore our surroundings with our hands, feet, mouth, and so on. Because it's difficult to guess what some objects are really like with the eyes alone, for example, their weight, hardness or softness, roughness or smoothness, etc., touching them gives us a much fuller understanding of the objects around us. Yet, how touch works is very complex and
Spring wedding season has arrived, ushering in hefty costs for guests, and especially for members of the wedding party. But it can be hard for 20-somethings to fit extra costs into scant budgets, especially if you have multiple weddings to attend. So be sure to determine what you are signing up for before committing to be part of the ceremony or a guest at a destination wedding, and look for ways to trim costs. If you are asked to be a part of a ceremony, don't hesitate to ask the bride and groom up front for details, including the event's location and other functions they may expect you to attend. In return, be honest with them about your financial situation. Colleen Bayust, 24, attended 4 weddings last year, traveling from Washington to Boston, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, a total of 7 times for dress fittings, bachelorette parties, and the ceremonies. It really added up. I had to tell my friend in Boston that I didn't have the money to attend her bachelorette party in Manhattan, she says. If you know you can't afford to fly to a destination wedding in the Caribbean, plus a weekend bridal party in Miami, speak up from the beginning, says Susan Rowan, a networking and etiquette expert in San Francisco. It's fair to say I love you, but I don't want to shortchange you if I can't afford to participate in every aspect, she says.
Reasons for the migration of Asians to the United States were similar in some ways to those for the Atlantic migration of Europeans. to escape from poverty and civil war, and to find employment, opportunity, and freedom. Chinese laborers were recruited to build the Transcontinental Railroad in the mid-19th century and provide domestic services in cities such as San Francisco. They were followed by the Japanese and Filipinos in the early 20th century, who labored in Hawaiian plantations, California farms, and Alaskan canneries. Of these early Asian Americans, only the Japanese were allowed to immigrate as families at the insistence of the Japanese government. For these early generations, Asians in America were largely bachelor communities of temporary sojourners, with male-to-female ratios as high as 10-1. Asian American children in those early years were rare. Since 1970, the demography of this population has changed tremendously. In 2002, Asian Americans were slightly more than 4% of the U.S. population. The growth of the Asian American population since 1970 is due in great part to the elimination of exclusionary immigration policies that existed before 1965, implementation of new refugee statutes directly flowing from the Vietnam War, and the rise of second and subsequent U.S.-born generations. In 1970, there were 1.5 million Asian Americans. This amounts to an 8-fold to 9-fold increase in little more than 30 years. Cities and towns are not only growing in size and number, they're also gaining new influence. The urban transition offers significant opportunities to improve the quality of life. But whether this potential is realized depends critically on how cities are managed and on the national and local policies affecting their development. The development of urban areas is also closely linked to the rural economy through the exchange of labor, goods, services, information, and technology. Neglecting urban issues leads to significant social and environmental costs, however. In the two most urbanized regions that the World Bank serves, Latin America and Europe, Central Asia, over half of the poor already live in urban areas. By 2025, 2/3 of the poor in these regions and 1/3 of the poor in East and South Asia will reside in cities or towns. The nature of urban poverty is more than an income or employment issue, and is also characterized by squalid living conditions, risks to life and health from poor sanitation, air pollution, crime and violence, traffic accidents, and natural disasters, and the breakdown of traditional familial and communal safety nets. Urban populations are also particularly hard hit by macro-financial shocks, such as the recent crisis in East Asia and Russia. Urban environmental degradation has the most immediate effects on poor urban residents, but also has serious national and global impacts.
Noises are defined as disagreeable sounds, but this suggests that they are no more than an annoyance, something to be put up with. There is increasing evidence that noise, on the scale that people who live in big cities have to deal with, is dangerous and can give rise to serious health and social problems, some of which, such as its effects on people's behavior and anger levels, you might not have thought were caused by noise and are health concerns. There is, of course, the almost constant noise of traffic, though this isn't a particularly modern problem. In ancient Rome, there were rules to minimize the noise made by the iron wheels of wagons, which battered the stones on the pavement, causing disruption of sleep. Traffic noise is one of the health hazards, as it can lead to other problems like noise-induced hearing impairment. It is also highly distracting, interfering with speech communication and leisure time relaxation. And while this doesn't drive you mad in the medical sense, it is intensely annoying and can lead to mental health problems. Also, noise, whether you work in a place where loud machinery is operating or not, can have an effect on performance at work. Though in itself not a health matter, this can lead to other problems.
Heart and blood vessel diseases still kill more people, not only in this country, but also worldwide than everything else combined, and yet it's completely preventable for almost everybody. It's not only preventable, it's actually reversible. And for the last almost 29 years, we've been able to show that by simply changing diet and lifestyle, using these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be, like quantitative arteriography before and after a year and cardiac PET scans. We showed a few months ago, we published the first study showing that you can actually stop or reverse the progression of prostate cancer by making changes in diet and lifestyle. Now, there is an epidemic of obesity, 2/3 of adults and 15% of kids. What's really concerning to me is that diabetes has increased 70% in the past 10 years, and this may be the first generation in which our kids live a shorter lifespan than we do. That's pitiful, and it's preventable.
Let's imagine a college student being late for class. New Jay, who's her current teacher, learned about nonviolent communication and knows that it begins with a clear observation. During observation, he tries noticing concrete facts, things that happen at that very moment. New Jay jots down that Anne arrived 20 minutes late and that his pulse is up, possibly a sign of stress. When focusing on his feelings, New Jay connects with his heart and can learn to understand various underlying emotions. This is important because what seems to be anger might in fact be sadness. During this step, it is essential to distinguish feelings from thoughts. After class, New Jay shares his observation and explains to Anne that he feels disrespected when someone is late for his class. Knowing his needs is important because it allows him to enrich his life and feel at peace. If we disregard our needs or don't live up to our values, we experience stress and frustration. New Jay tells Anne that they should find a way to respect each other's values and desires. Lastly, there is the request, which clarifies what future New Jay wants for himself and this relationship. Clear requests are hence crucial to a transformative communication. When we ask for concrete actions, we often find creative ways to ensure that everyone's needs are met. New Jay asks Anne not to come to class at all if she happens to run later than 1 minute.
I suppose the reason I got into geology was, well, as a kid I was fascinated by fossils. The fact that they went back countless years, long before there were any people on the planet. That was exciting, and they were beautiful too. And one thing led to another. What fascinates me? Let me give you an example. Suppose we dredge up from the seafloor some silt washed down by a river, and suppose that for political or other reasons we can't enter the country through which that river runs. Well, by careful study of the particles of that silt, we can form a pretty accurate picture of the nature of that country. Not just the rocks, I mean, but the vegetation and animal life of the area. I sometimes think what we do is a bit like Sherlock Holmes. You know, he takes a look at a man's shoes and can tell you which field in which county he's been in and when. That sort of detective aspect of the work is always interesting and exciting. Okay, we do spend time in the lab and at the computer, but we do get out and about and go to interesting places for field work.
Therapy can be defined as a form of psychotherapy which uses art as its main means of communication. Patients needn't have any particular talent in art, since the art therapist is not concerned with making an assessment of what the patient produces. The principal aim of this kind of therapy is to facilitate the patient's well-being in order to bring change and growth on a personal level through the use of art materials. Obviously, as always, the relationship between the therapist and the patient is important, but art therapy differs from other psychological therapies because it's a process between the patient, the therapist, and the art. So what we've found is the expressive nature of this therapy is particularly successful with those who have difficulty expressing themselves verbally.
Medicinal tablets are nothing new. Doctors have been dispensing pills for thousands of years, and now archaeologists have turned up some of those ancient medicines, which were preserved in a shipwreck for close to 2 millennia. The 2nd century Pozzino wreck was discovered in 1974 off the coast of Italy. Its cargo included medical equipment, like a cupping vessel, iron probe, and tin boxes of supplies. And in one of those boxes, researchers recovered 5 gray tablets. Now, they've analyzed the antique medication. The work is in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The pills primarily contain zinc compounds, probably the active medicinal ingredients, but researchers also detected starch, pollen, charcoal, fats, and linen fibers. Those fibers help the tablets hold their round, loaf-like shape, which may be the key to the medication's use. The Greek word meaning small round loaves also inspired the word collyrium, or eye wash. The pills were probably either dissolved in liquid or ground into a powder and used to treat eye conditions. Who knows? Maybe Hippocrates used them on his pupils.
The Meridiana Planum region of Mars once had water that was really salty and highly acidic, conditions incredibly hostile to any life forms that we know about. So any organisms that might have once lived in that area on Mars would really have had to beat the odds. But why do we know so much about the likelihood of a particular environment to support life? Mars scientists can thank you and me and our propensity to eat. Harvard professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences Andrew Knoll spoke to reporters Friday at the AAAS meeting.
The food preservation industry depends highly on people knowing the kind of ionic tolerances of microorganisms. So this isn't some esoteric thing that a Mars scientist will pull the paper off the shelf. There are thousands of papers out there on the tolerances of microorganisms, and it's not because most scientists are worried about Meridiani planum, it's because they're worried about botulism in canned vegetables.
So one science feeds another.
Tomorrow's lecture will discuss educational policy in the United States. This course contains most of important information.